A Mother and Her Son in 1925. Experts analyzed the photograph and were left speechless. Dr. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her reading glasses as she carefully examined the contents of a donated estate collection at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. Among the dusty boxes of documents and memorabilia from the Henderson family of Chicago, one photograph in particular drew her attention. The black and white image, dated 1925, showed a well-dressed woman in her 30s, standing beside a boy who appeared to be about 12 years old. They posed formally in front of what seemed to be a modest Chicago brownstone, both wearing their finest clothing. What immediately struck Sarah was not the subjects themselves, but something unusual in the background. Behind the mother's left shoulder, barely visible in the house's window, was a reflection that seemed strangely out of place for the period. She reached for a magnifying glass, her heart beginning to race as she focused on the mysterious detail. The image quality was remarkably sharp for a photograph from 1925. As she studied it more closely, she noticed that the boy's hand appeared to be deliberately positioned over something on his jacket. "This can't be right," Sarah whispered to herself, her breath catching as she realized what she might be seeing. The photograph, which moments earlier had seemed completely ordinary, was beginning to reveal secrets that could rewrite everything known about this family. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she placed the photograph beneath the museum's high-powered digital microscope. What she saw made her question everything she believed about photography in the 1920s. The reflection in the window behind the mother appeared to show an impossibly clear image of someone taking the photograph. Yet the camera visible in that reflection was far too advanced for technology available in 1925. Even more intriguing was the boy's jacket. Under magnification, Sarah could see that his small hand was carefully concealing what looked like a small metallic object pinned to his lapel. The object bore markings that were barely visible but appeared to contain symbols that did not match any known badges or pins from that era. The mother's expression, which at first glance had seemed pleasant and ordinary, now appeared strained when examined closely. Her eyes held an intensity that suggested she was hiding something important. Sarah picked up the phone to call her colleague, Professor James Rodriguez, a specialist in early 20th century American photography. "James, I need you to come to the lab immediately. I found something that doesn't make sense." As she waited for his arrival, Sarah could not shake the feeling that this simple family portrait was about to unlock a mystery hidden for nearly a century. Professor Rodriguez arrived within the hour, his curiosity piqued by Sarah's urgency as he leaned over the microscope to examine the photograph. His expression shifted from skeptical interest to genuine bewilderment. "The camera technology visible in this reflection," he said slowly, "shouldn't exist for at least another 15 years. And look at the lighting. This photograph shows evidence of flash photography techniques that weren't commercially available until the late 1930s. Sarah pointed to the object concealed by the boy's hand. "And there's this. Whatever he's hiding appears to have some kind of encoded markings. I've never seen anything like it from that period." They decided to run the photograph through the museum's advanced imaging software, hoping to enhance the hidden details without damaging the original print. While the computers processed the image, Sarah began researching the Henderson family. The donation paperwork indicated that the photograph had belonged to Margaret Henderson, who had died in 2019 at the age of 97. Margaret's granddaughter, Emily Henderson Walsh, had donated the family collection after her grandmother's death. According to the documentation, the woman in the photograph was identified in Margaret's handwriting as Mother and Thomas. 1925. "We need to contact Emily Henderson Walsh," Sarah told James. "If anyone has answers about this photograph and this family, it would be her. Something tells me this image holds secrets that Margaret took to her grave." Emily Henderson Walsh arrived at the museum 2 days later. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair. As Sarah showed her the enhanced images, Emily's face went pale. "I never knew Grandma Margaret had this photograph," she whispered, staring at the image of the woman and boy. "But that's not my grandmother in the picture." Sarah and James exchanged glances. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked gently. Emily took a shaky breath. "The woman in this photograph, that's my great-grandmother, Helen Henderson. She disappeared in 1925 when my grandmother, Margaret, was just 14 years old. The family always said Helen abandoned them, but Margaret never believed it. She spent her entire life trying to find out what really happened to her mother." Emily pointed to the boy. "And that must be Thomas, Margaret's younger brother. He disappeared the same day as Helen." The room fell silent as the implications settled in. This was not just a family portrait. It might be one of the last photographs ever taken of two people who vanished without a trace nearly a century ago. Emily continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Margaret always said there was more to the story. She believed her mother and brother were in some kind of danger, but no one ever listened to her. She kept searching for answers until the day she died. As the enhanced imaging results came back, the mysterious object beneath Thomas's hand became clearer. It was indeed a small metallic pen, but the symbols etched into it were unlike anything any of them had seen before. The markings appeared to be a combination of numbers and geometric shapes arranged in a precise pattern. James immediately recognized it as some form of code. "This isn't decorative," he said, tracing the pattern with his finger on the computer screen. "This is deliberate. Someone wanted this information preserved, but hidden." Sarah contacted Dr. Marcus Webb, a cryptography expert at Georgetown University, sending him high-resolution images of the pen's markings. Meanwhile, Emily shared more family history. Margaret always said her mother, Helen, had been involved in something important before she disappeared. Helen worked as a seamstress, but Margaret remembered her staying up late at night, writing letters and having whispered conversations on the telephone. When Helen and Thomas vanished, all of Helen's personal belongings disappeared, as well her letters, her photographs, everything. Dr. Webb called back within hours, his excitement palpable over the phone. "The symbols on the pen," he explained, "were consistent with coded communication systems used by women's suffrage organizations and early civil rights groups in the 1920s. However, this particular combination was something he had never seen before. It was more sophisticated than typical activist codes of that era. This suggested that Helen Henderson had been involved in something far more organized and potentially dangerous than anyone had realized." Dr. Webb's analysis opened an entirely new avenue of investigation. Sarah spent the next week immersed in archives of women's suffrage organizations active in Chicago during the 1920s. Although women had gained the right to vote in 1920, many activists continued working underground on civil rights, labor rights, and social justice causes that remained controversial and sometimes dangerous in the Chicago Historical Society archives. Sarah found records of the Silent Sisters, a secretive organization of women who worked to protect activists and their families from threats and violence. The group operated between 1921 and 1927, helping relocate people whose civil rights work had placed them in danger. The organization relied on a complex system of codes and symbols to communicate safely. Meanwhile, Emily had been examining Margaret's personal effects more closely. In an old jewelry box, she discovered a small piece of paper tucked behind the velvet lining. Written on it were the words, "Helen Henderson, Chicago, 1925, Protection Protocol 7, Thomas Safe." The handwriting was faded, but still legible. When Sarah saw the note, her pulse quickened. Protection Protocol 7 suggested that Helen and Thomas had not disappeared by choice. They had been relocated for their safety, The photograph might not have been evidence of a simple family portrait, but rather documentation of their last day before entering a protection program. The sophisticated camera technology could be explained if the photograph had been taken by someone with access to advanced equipment, perhaps law enforcement or government agents involved in the relocation. Sarah's theory about government involvement led her to contact the National Archives, where she requested access to previously classified documents from the patent team. What she discovered shocked everyone involved in the investigation. Helen Henderson's name appeared in federal records as an informant who had provided crucial information about organized crime activities in Chicago during the height of Prohibition. The documents revealed that Helen had been working undercover, using her position as a seamstress to gather intelligence on illegal alcohol operations and their connections to corrupt city officials. Her work had been so valuable that when her cover was blown in early 1925, the federal government made the unprecedented decision to relocate both her and her son, Thomas, to protect them from retaliation. The advanced camera equipment visible in the photograph's reflection now made perfect sense. It belonged to federal agents who were documenting Helen and Thomas before their relocation. The photograph was official evidence of their entry into one of the earliest witness protection programs in American history. Emily was stunned by these revelations. So Margaret was right all along, she said, tears streaming down her face. Her mother didn't abandon the family. She was protecting them by leaving. The coded pin Thomas wore contained the coordinates and contact information for their new identities. It's information that would have allowed Margaret to find them if she had ever cracked the code. But the mystery was not yet solved. If Helen and Thomas had been successfully relocated, why had Margaret never been able to find them? And why had this photograph remained hidden for so long? Further investigation revealed the heartbreaking truth of why Margaret never found her mother and brother. The witness protection program of the 1920s was crude and dangerous compared to modern systems. Records from the National Archives showed that Helen and Thomas had been relocated to a small farming community in rural Montana under the names Helen and Thomas Morrison. For 3 years, the relocation appeared successful. Helen worked as a school teacher, while Thomas attended the local school and helped on a nearby farm. They maintained no contact with their former life in Chicago, as the program required. In 1928, however, tragedy struck. A fire destroyed much of the small Montana town, including the school where Helen worked and several homes, among them the one where Helen and Thomas lived. Local records from the period were incomplete, but witness accounts suggested that Helen died while trying to save children from the burning school. Thomas, now 15, disappeared after his mother's funeral. Some accounts suggested he attempted to return to Chicago to find Margaret, but he never arrived. Other reports indicated he may have been taken in by a farming family in a neighboring state, but no official records existed to confirm this. The federal agents who had arranged Helen's relocation were reassigned to other cases, and the informal witness protection program was eventually discontinued. The files on Helen and Thomas Morrison were classified and forgotten, leaving Margaret to search for Helen and Thomas Henderson people who no longer officially existed. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Dr. Webb discovered additional markings on the photograph that had been invisible during earlier analysis. Using ultraviolet imaging, he found faint writing on the back of the photograph in what appeared to be Thomas's handwriting, addressed to Margaret. If you find this, look for the teacher in Big Sky Country. The code will lead you home. 1925. Emily immediately understood the significance. Big Sky Country was a nickname for Montana, and Thomas had left his sister a clue about their relocation. Margaret had never seen this message because it was only visible under special lighting that did not exist when she was searching for her family. Sarah and Emily decided to follow Thomas's trail to Montana, Working with local historians in the town where the 1928 fire had occurred, they uncovered something remarkable. The local cemetery contained a small memorial section for the fire's victims, and among the names was Helen Morrison, beloved teacher. There was no grave for Thomas. Their research also revealed a local legend about a young man who arrived in the area in the late 1920s, claiming he was searching for his sister in Chicago. Local families helped him, and he eventually settled there under the name Tom Rivers. Tom became a respected member of the community, working as a teacher like his mother and raising a family of his own. The breakthrough came when they found a photograph in the local historical society's collection, a 1950 school photograph showing Tom Rivers with his students. Despite 35 years of aging and a different name, Emily could clearly see the resemblance to the 12-year-old boy in the 1925 photograph. The final pieces of the puzzle fell into place when Sarah and Emily located Tom Rivers' descendants, still living in Montana. Tom had died in 1987, but his son, Michael Rivers, was still alive and living on the family ranch. When Emily called Michael and explained who she was, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Father talked about his sister Margaret his entire life, Michael finally said, his voice thick with emotion. He never stopped, hoping she would find him. He kept that photograph you found hidden in a secret compartment of his desk. He said that someday his sister would understand the code and come looking for him. Emily learned that Tom had indeed tried to return to Chicago in 1928 after Helen's death. But he was a 15-year-old boy with no money and no proof of his identity. By the time he could have made the journey, he worried that too much time had passed and that Margaret might have moved on with her life. He made the difficult decision to build a new life in Montana while always hoping Margaret would somehow find him. The most emotional discovery came when Michael showed Emily a box of items his father had kept throughout his life. Letters he had written to Margaret but never sent, photographs of his family that he hoped to share with her someday, and a detailed explanation of the code on his pen, written clearly so that Margaret could understand their story if she ever found the Eid to Arwool photograph. As Emily held these precious artifacts, she realized that Margaret and Thomas had been searching for each other their entire lives, separated by circumstances beyond their control, but never forgetting their bond. The photograph that had begun as a simple family portrait revealed a story of love, sacrifice, and unbreakable family connections across time and distance. Margaret had died just 2 years before Emily discovered the truth. Yet Emily knew her grandmother would have been overjoyed to learn that Thomas had lived a good life, had never forgotten her, and that their mother, Helen, had died a hero, saving children's lives. The photograph, once analyzed by experts, finally delivered the answers Margaret had sought for nearly a century.